Welcome everyone. Thank you for hi Yenny, says the guy from she's a wonderful head of social impact at Niantic. Um, Welcome to Building a More Equitable Games Industry. I'm Kelly Santiago. I have been a game developer myself, a co-founder of that game company, which is most known for the game Journey on PlayStation. I moved into developer relations and publishing with the kickstarted Android console Ouya, moving over to Google as a partner development manager at Play, and then in VR and AR under the Google Daydream org. And then I've been joined Niantic 2 years ago and work with external developers such as Jessica, interested in developing new experiences using the same tools and technology and publishing infrastructure that we've used for Ingress, Harry Potter Wizards Unite, and of course Pokemon Go, as well as a few titles we have in soft launch now. If you've seen, I'll do a little quick plug of Heavy Metal, our Transformers game, Catan, World Explorers, and Pikmin app. So exploring a lot of different ways to get people outdoors, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. I'm joined today, as I was mentioning, by Jessica Murray of Wicked Saints. Jessica has been a award-winning communication specialist and common ground activist. She's the CEO and co-founder of Wicked Saints Studios, which has developed a text-based interactive story game Pitfall, and is our first developer in the Niantic Black Developers Initiative, which we'll be talking about today, working on a title called World Reborn. Her background is in common ground activism, and which I'll have Jessica speak to in a bit. And I don't know, kicking ass and being awesome. On a similar note, Trinidad Hermidad, who heads up diversity and inclusion, instrumental partner in developing the Black Developers Initiative. She has been at Niantic now, was almost 3 years, and is developing our diversity inclusion initiatives, as well as providing life coaching and career coaching to a lot of individuals in tech and gaming. That was my whirlwind overview. I guess first, Trinidad, I would love it. Oh, and I'll also say that I am like both moderator and panelist of this discussion. So the format's going to be, you know, hopefully a bit free flowing. I've asked Trinidad and Jessica to feel free to, you know, pipe in with questions of their own and prompts as we're moving through this conversation. But Trinidad, I thought maybe we'd start with just you setting the context for how the Black Developers Initiative came to be.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for that introduction, Kelly, because I mean, I would be honored to introduce you any day. Like, I think Kelly didn't give it due diligence of how awesome she really is. And to be honest, I wouldn't have been able to. It takes definitely a village to do anything at any company. And so just to have great partners within the business and the organization to make impact, this is dope. So I'm going to just take us on a little journey. Let's go back to last year, right before this time. It was June 2020. We're in a global pandemic, and unfortunately, a lot of us witnessed via social media the murder of George Floyd. At that time, our company and several companies within all industries had to make a decision on how are they going to respond to social injustice and real injustice, just injustice, period. And there was a group of some wonderful people at Niantic who came together and formulated a letter to just ask, what can we do? What can we do at Niantic that can not just be performative, but not only informative, but impactful, something that is real and sustainable, something that is going to change lives. And we came up with an ask, and we went before our executive leaders with this ask. And to my wonderful surprise, the ask was like, yeah. But then they came with more. It was like the ask wasn't enough. Like we came low. It's like, okay, we're just asking for this. We just want to matter. And they're like, no, more than matters. We're going to take all of the donations from Pigo, and we're going to put it to our communities. And then the wonderful idea came out about how can we create an equitable program for Black developers to come in and be empowered and build in that equity gap of knowledge, of support, of coaching, of just our resources and tools that we have, because we have a wealth of people within our organization who've been doing this for years. I mean, Kelly, you're one of them, right? Like the experience that you have. So it was a great idea, and it was something that, of course, took another village of people to come together. Social impact and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and product and executive leaders. It took a whole slew of folks to be like, how are we going to make this equitable? Getting people to have buy-in, getting people to think about, one thing that I love about having a balanced team is not everybody thinks the same. So I might be focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then someone else is focused on like, well, how do we make this a great product? And then, it's just all of the people at the table help make this happen. But it didn't happen overnight. And I'm going to pause after I say this, but it took 6 months just to get the foundation laid. And so I'm grateful that Niantic gave us the time, the resources, and the funding to be able to do the due diligence, just to get the foundation laid, just to get the buy-in, just to get people to understand this is not just another program that we're slapping on the name of another program. We're taking this and we're breaking it down, and then we're going to build it back up so it has a strong foundation.
Yeah, and I think it's that I'm so glad you surfaced the point about the time it took to build the infrastructure. I think a lot of companies can feel, and teams can feel pressure in these moments to promise to take action and then show the action really quickly. And for any of you, I mean, I think Games for Change draws from a wide audience of from civil servants and people in politics and government, as well as game development. And I think the similarities in those spaces can be that just like to do something right, it takes time, and it takes a lot of people, as Trinidad was saying, from different parts of our own organization to come together and have these difficult conversations. And so to do something more, what we hope will be more meaningful and impactful and sustainable in a long-term sense, which was kind of the high ambition that Trinidad and I set out for this when we started it. It does take time. And then I'll just add that it also takes a Trinidad who is someone that pushes the hard conversations, like also while simultaneously creating safe spaces for everyone to have really messy conversations. And I think to me, that's a big part of this work is being able to pull together this diverse group of people and have the messy conversations we need to have to say, basically, like, why hasn't this happened already? Because those are the very barriers that we're going to hit as we try and go down this road. We're not the first company, the first group of people to try, to think of something like this. So thank you, Trinidad. It's been very fantastic, and I highly recommend you all get your own, and not mine, but get your own version of Trinidad to your companies.
I was gonna say that, like, failure. So I love Brene Brown, and this is not going to be a Brene Brown, and Jessica knows this because I send her like random clips from Brene Brown randomly throughout the week. But she talks about courage a lot, and this is not going to be a Brene Brown session. But one thing that specifically speaks to me is, in order to have courage, like, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to get in the ring, and you have to get in the arena, right? Like, so if we're trying to do something that's never been done before, we have to be willing to fail. And so you don't go into the arena knowing that you're going to win this battle ultimately, like, or then there would be no sports, right? Like, there would be like none of that. And so being able to just say, you know what, the first step is getting in the arena and saying, we're going to fight. We're going to try and do this the right way. But being open to failure and tweaking and changing and shifting. And so that's why it's awesome that we have Jessica here, because I truly believe that, like, there's some, like, Jessica and Wicked Saints being the first within this program, I think we've learned a lot of things. Jessica, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've learned a lot of things for sure, but yeah, no, absolutely. It's been amazing to be a part of.
Yeah, so to set some context here, when we started with this commitment to take half of the entirety of proceeds from ticket sales for GoFest last year, which was an entirely virtual event, were dedicated towards two initiatives. Half of the money went to our social impact team to find and identify organizations that invest in Black community work in across America. And so that was distributed and donated to non-for-profits in that space. And then the other half was to bring Black-led developers to AR and identify developers in the AR space to partner with Niantic. And so I felt like Trinidad and I set out with Daphne LaRose at that time, who was collaborating with us on this, to set out the high ambition, which is can this be a new self-sustaining line of business for Niantic? Because we think that would have the most impact. Again, happy to have anyone bounce off of these, but these were kind of our founding principles. To have these funds go into revenue generating endeavors that then can like continue to feed a cycle of increasing the diversity of developers partnering with Niantic and in the AR space. And so the first step was, okay, how much is the lack of diversity in Niantic partnerships due to intrinsic biases in our system today? And so the timing of this commitment happened to be alongside a just public-facing call for developers that I was running on the publishing side at that time, called the Beyond Reality Initiative. Yeah, I'll skip over the details of that, but it was just more broadly, and it was sort of saying, can we just take a look at that and see, can we broaden the pool of developers? Can we identify more Black-led developers by more consciously trying to break the biases that exist within our own networks today, reaching out, plugging into communities in a more targeted way. And I would say that I think that's where Wicked Saints and Jessica Murray came in through that initiative. And she also has been so amazing at entering into very transparent and messy conversations. And I think that's one of the reasons we really wanted to partner with her and say, will you kind of come along with us as like, we're being upfront that you're going to be our first developer. That's going to be messy. We really want to learn a lot. We want to help grow this and come alongside it. And so that's where Wicked Saints came in. And just to skip to the conclusion of kind of how that first analysis went, was that it's not, there were some elements of biases in our own network that I think we successfully like navigated out of and continue to use those processes in any call for developers to break out of our biases, but it wasn't enough. That's the next step of Black Developers Initiative. I think I want to kind of stop here and tee up you, Jessica, to talk about kind of how you came into partnering with Niantic and more about Wicked Saints and yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also one thing to add on to this as well is that the actual demographics of how many of the game industry, because I think that's really, really important to know, like, because I hear it's like, okay, like why Black Developers Initiative, you know, and like, okay, yes, this happened with George Floyd, but like, why else? And I think when I was looking at some of the stats about this before, it's like 2% of the game industry is Black. So it's just like a very, very small percentage, one that I didn't realize coming in, because I didn't come in through a traditional game industry background. And so so the story of how like we got in and got connected starts a long time ago, because my partner Alicia and I have been working on this idea of how do we empower millions of youth around common ground activism, which is all about how to attack the problem and not the person. And so at the time, when this got started, Alicia and I are working for Search for Common Ground. So it's the world's largest dedicated peacebuilding organization, offices all over the world, and it has incredible youth programs. And so that's where we are working and trying to get something going. If you've seen me before, if I look kind of familiar, that we initially started with Battle for Humanity was our gamified app where we were going to do this. And so we've been working on this concept for years. Like literally, we had like a kickoff date in, I think it was 2014 in Norway, where we brought in like all these like disruptors and peace builders from like Somalia and Pakistan, and like that was like in 2014. So just to say, if any of you guys have an idea that you've been working on a long time, I totally feel you. And so we've just been working on it and learning and making different iterations of it. And when we finally launched Battle for Humanity and and our pilot for that, we learned so much in that pilot that we're like, you know what, we're gonna like, this isn't a pivot. This is like a whole 180. Like we need interactive story games with real life action. Like we need to figure out a way to combine these. And so I had started having conversations with Yenny, who is social impact at Niantic. And I met Yenny, we were talking for like years before this, because I was like, okay, you guys, Niantic has been able to move people in the real world. Like we're trying to move people in the real world to do good. We should like, how do we line up? How do we connect? And at the time, the only real avenue was the Beyond Reality initiative. And it just didn't quite work for us because like we didn't have like, it's the chicken or the egg, right? It's like, okay, well, we don't have any money, like nonprofit folks, you know, like we don't have any money to bring on a team to like apply for it. So so the first route we went was we tried to go to VC route. We actually found someone that was like, hey, we'll fund this, but you need to be a for-profit. So we completely spun off. We created our own whole new thing. Wicked Saint Studio created a whole new storyline, started picking out a team while we were waiting for the investment to come through. So now fast forward to last year. And right after things happened with George Floyd, someone was like, okay, you need to do a Kickstarter because people are going to care about this now, but they're not going to care about it in a few months. And so we did a Kickstarter. We got just enough money to like confidently be able to bring on some of these, to be able to say to some of our teammates, like, we will eventually be able to pay you for some of your assets. But at the same time, this investor ended up backing out on us. And so we were just in a bad spot. And you know, so we're doing everything we can. And that's when I ended up having a Games for Change conversation, our panel with Trinidad. And then afterwards, Trini's like, hey, let's talk. What are you trying to do? And we're like, literally, we're trying to build a game that will train young people how to deal with issues on race and polarization and divides and like all this stuff that's going on now. And we want to like empower them to like handle difference in a positive way and take it to society and do these things in our community. Because that was one of the things we discovered from Battle for Humanity, is that what was preventing people to going out and doing stuff in the real world was actually their self-efficacy, their belief in their ability to accomplish a goal. And so we started talking. We we applied. So we got so this team that had been working for free for like over a year with us and just like kind of developing a concept, came on board, and we applied for it. And we got past like that first stage, but then we had to figure out like an actual concept that used AR, which we did not originally have in our initial concept, and try to figure out like, okay, like how does this make sense with our story game? But what we ended up coming up with was so like, as soon as we added AR and geolocation to our game, it made it so much cooler. Like, oh my gosh. And like we had to build this whole world to encompass it. And it all made sense, and it became so cool and so fun. But yeah, so it's been a process. So we applied. There's been several steps, and we can talk about like how all of that went in, because some great discussion also happened during that time where both Kelly and Trinidad were very open to listening to my feedback as we're going through. So like, imagine this now, like I'm trying to apply for like funding from Niantic, but at the same time I'm like, actually, does it have to be this way? Can we change this, or this doesn't quite work? And during that process, they like, both of you guys were able to really hear me and listen to me and like adapt like as you're moving, which was just amazing. Like, I don't know how you guys were able to just like on the spot be like, make little pivots, but yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Trinidad, do you want to speak to kind of how we were able to make those initial pivots, or what you felt like was helpful because I think there was an element where the first step was kind of throwing a bunch of ideas on paper and then kind of interviewing the major stakeholders at Niantic on what their thoughts were and how they envisioned this money being spent or this initiative being started up. And that led to a one pager, although Trinidad and I couldn't contain to one page. It was like 1.5, 2 pages, 2-pager on, but what did outline like foundational principles of sort of what are we out to do and what are we not going to do. We're not donating this money to a bunch, we're not just doing grants, which is not to say just like that's fantastic use of funds. And we can talk about how they really facilitate, for instance, like what Jessica was talking about, these periods of time where you're essentially working for free, and that's a big barrier to entry in general. But that's not what we were going to do. We were going to, try and apply it to the publishing model. And I think that helped in these tiny and big pivots that we had to make along the way and continue to have to make.
It was an adventure. Let's just start with that. It was an adventure because I've never published a game in my life. I'm just really passionate, right? I'm passionate about equity. So I know what I don't know. But I also know what gaps, some of the gaps that are in this space. So when we came together, and it really did truly take all of us collectively being open, being humble, being able to ask tough questions. I think I asked a lot of questions, Kelly, that I was like, but why? Like, why do we do it like this? And it could have been, I mean, I call it ignorance. I don't know. So I'm asking questions because I don't know, and in a safe space where they know that I don't know. So even asking for more clarity. So why do we want Niantic to publish these games? Like, what is that the end goal? And then to hear out of some of our senior leaders' minds, because then we want to give all. We want to be able to bring it in-house and build it up and help it be successful. And that to me gave me some peace of mind to know that, we're not trying to cut corners when it comes to our publishing. Also, Kelly, even the conversation around, is this going to be a grant? Is this going to be a VC? Is this going to be that's like step number one. what are we trying to accomplish here? And what does that look like? What does holistically an equitable program look like? And that might look different at every company, you know. And so even understanding the culture of Niantic, how we move, shake, and operate internally, it helped us to build a solid foundation so that we can navigate with our stakeholders and the leaders who are supportive of this program to be successful. So I do think it took a lot of back and forth. Once we got all the buy-ins and we've had these conversations. And listen, can I stop here and say we're still learning. Every day we're still learning, even in our previous call out, because we're on a second cohort now. And can I just say, like, thank you to everybody who applied for the Black Developer Initiative and went and put their effort in, because like, we are as successful as the people who enter into this space and collaborate with us. Like Jessica, thank you so much. You know, and I think about the cohort, the second cohort that's coming in. Like, I'm just excited about the opportunities to learn internally of what may resonate and what may not, because we're even still learning what is resonating with our partners. So I don't know if I answered your question, Kelly. I was just like, it was an adventure. It was an adventure of, hey, has this been done before the right way? And so even contacting our partners in the industry and saying, how's your program going? What have you learned? Like, we, just so for people to know, we talk to each other. We're not just an island into ourselves. So there are other programs out there that are dope. They're different, but they're dope. So we wanted to glean from them and even reach out to them and learn from them. So that was helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that was a really strong part of the process of creating it. You said something I had brought up two things for me. Yes, that point of really asking, you know, what is it we're doing, and like, what is it that we can do, you know, testing it against our own resources. I think there were a few conversations we had, because it's a huge problem. Can you hear me okay? I think I skipped out for a second. Okay. It's a complicated problem. And sometimes it would just be like, you know, we're not going to solve systemic racism in the games industry with $6 million. Like, it's just, that is something we can't do, you know. It's sort of, in the largest sense, you know, what is it, as any of you attending here and like looking at this, that is part of the analysis, like, what can I do? I also feel like I'm late to this, but recently discovered Simon Sinek's Infinite Game, and the difference between finite games and infinite games. And finite games are like football and soccer, and infinite are like politics and social change and these things. And that one of the qualities of an infinite game is that you don't have winners or losers. You just have people who are willing to play and people who aren't. And that really resonated with me in this work, that it's not about getting to the winning outcome. It's just, am I willing to wake up every day and play this game? And, you know, certainly in this space, my answer is yes. Jess, I think it would be great to for you to talk about your own like the ways in which I feel like you have hit on a lot of the spots of inequality in the way the games industry is structured today, and even your own story of starting Wicked Saints. And yeah, as you said, you know, briefly, that like you had a period of time where people were working for free. Like, that is obviously dependent on having people that can afford to do that, and just, you know, kind of what are the ways in which you've experienced these gaps?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so there's a lot of gaps, and I'll start by saying that I have experienced some gaps, but I have also experienced privilege And so there's some that are out there there's many out there that I have not experienced. And so, I mean, there's so many different levels of things, you know? So there's just plain old bias. Sometimes, you know, like being a young woman of color, it's really hard to gain, to get people to trust you with their money, and that you can actually do what you say that you can do. And I think one of the things, and this is just in general across innovation, is I think what's a lot of times really hard for people of color who are creators and innovators is that you don't feel like you have a chance to fail. So failure is just part of innovation. It's like it's how we learn. It's how we learn how to make pivots, because it's all about our audience and our player and user experience. And so, but when you are a person of color, you feel like you have one shot. So if you don't make your one shot, then that's it. And so, you know, and a lot of times, I've talked about this before, like especially if you don't have any qualifiers. So sometimes qualifiers could be like, I have a degree from Harvard or Yale, which I do not, State University, you know, or if you've worked for a big gaming company or something like that. But if you don't have qualifiers, sometimes people will just not quite trust that you can actually deliver on what you can. And so, so that's just a barrier that like many of us just have to figure. We just have to come out and deliver as best we can, as well as we can each time. But it is something that I think puts, because you're not going to be as willing to take some risks, right? And part of that also goes to social economic status of a lot of times you will have, you know, a lot of people have family and that can support and help fund some of these like early small ideas that you can like quickly fail or like hopefully succeed from. And if you don't have that kind of family money to do that, that is also that's also tough. You know, by the time I got to a place where I could step away from my job, I'm married and my husband was able to work while I was taking small jobs and trying to get this thing off the ground. But that's another huge thing is like most of us can't afford to just work for free. And then the people that we bring on, so I'm a writer and a storyteller, but I don't code. I'm not an engineer. So engineers are expensive, artists, you know, narrative game designer. And so my artist started working before I could pay her. Our engineers were helping us with game design documents before we could pay them. And our narrative game designer was like, I'm going to meet with you once a week to like try to get the structure of this story game right. And like, you know, and again, like they were a little bit higher up in their career. And so they were able to sustain that, but it's just not something sustainable. And so, and I know like this is something that like Trinidad talks about all the time, but it's, you know, it's not just, so it's like, okay, who can get in the room? And if you can't get into the room, like, why aren't they able to get into the room? But then it's like, once you're in the room, who's listening to you? You know, like, is what you're saying, does it have weight? Like, these are all, you know, these are all kind of things that come into play when you're building a team. And a lot of it really is chicken or egg, you know, like, do I have money to just like set off and make these kind of errors and take this kind of risk, or don't I? So, and I'm sure Trini has a whole, it could probably list off a whole litany of other barriers and things that come up for people of color in general. That's my pass off to you, Trini.
I heard you. I just needed to unmute. It's actually like, I mean, you could throw a rock at just like anything that that is something as simple as even the context of what is required being assumed that the person should know the context. Like it's very simple things. One thing that I'm very proud of that we're doing at Niantic is creating a pipeline of unconventional, conventional, whatever you want to call it, background engineers, right? And I'm going to use this as an example because if there are engineers out there, every company you go to is going to require you to submit your code differently. you know, like, and I just learned this, by the way, I just learned this recently. And I was like, so you're telling me that my manager can think that I'm lazy and not doing my job because I'm not submitting my code or turning, you know, like in Git labs every day, you know what I mean? Like, or what if I'm a nighttime coder, so it's coming up in the morning, or, you know, like whatever. So it's like something as simple as knowing what is desired and required of you to be successful. It's just the culture of the company, understanding, okay, you know, maybe in this, I'm making, like, in player number one, you know, is working at this company, and the company is very, like, their working hours are from 1 to 4, you know what I mean? Like, and if you don't get that little memo of like, hey, everybody is online from 1 to 4, and you're just like, hey, I'm a morning person, so I'm going to be online from 6 a.m. to noon or whatever, you know, and you're missing a whole 4 hours of collaborative time. So I'm using that as an example of like little things like that matter. And so when we're talking about ways that we can engage with people who've never been in this industry, and we're trying to really get innovation, creation, creativity, all that in a bag of chips, like, we have to make sure that we're sharing the cheat codes. I like calling them cheat codes. We're sharing what does it look like to be successful in this space. And so at Niantic, we recognize that Jessica, you need a coach. It's like, here's a coach who's been in this space, who's able to say, oh, so you're navigating with executive leaders. Here, let me coach you on how to approach this leader, how to send that email if you're saying something that might you feel like is scary to say because you're giving feedback, which is necessary in this space. So all that is stuff that a lot of people assume, because we've been in this space for a long period of time, it's like the back of our hand. So we're not thinking. It's like me trying to teach my mom how to text when text messaging first came out. I was like, yeah, mom, there's emojis, there's pictures, there's GIFs. Like, so now I get all these text messages with hella emojis, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm just like, oh, so she gets it now. But now I'm telling her, you don't have to send an emoji for every word, mom. Like, it's just, you could just say what you're trying to say, you know, like, so it's little things like that, which get me excited, because guess what? My mom's actually texting, right? Like, my mom's texting, my mom's doing the thing. So now it's navigating how do you refine it to where it's digestible for the person on the other side, so that I can give, you know, the message is being sent. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just to like give examples of like how Niantic's doing this with Black Developers Initiative. And so what Niantic has done is given us like basically the funds for 6 months to create a prototype. And within those 6 months, like, so not only am I able to fund my incredible, mind-blowing team, but like we also have access to support. So like, and got me an executive coach. Like I have, we check in with their game designers, their UX team, and their marketing team, and all these things. Be like, okay, like this is what you need to show. And through this process, like there's so much, there's so much that we just wouldn't know that we need to have. And so it's been a great learning experience. But this is like how it's like basically it's like the idea is like we want you to succeed, and so they're giving me access to information and knowledge and the cheat codes as we go into this green light presentation. And then one of the other cool things that Niantic really did, and this was something that like I think is very probably atypical for publishing pipelines, is that at the end of the 6 months, if they decide not to move forward with World Reborn, then we'll be able to, the IP will revert back, so that I can continue using the prototype and all this time that my team spent building this thing to shop it around. And so that was like one of the big things that Trinidad and Kelly both really listened to me on, is because that almost stopped it. Like something as small as that almost stopped it before it even got started, because I told Trini, I was like, I don't know if we can go after this. This is something that we've been working on for years, and the chance of us losing our IP or even getting a setback of like 6-7 months of work and not being able to use it, I don't know if I can risk that. And so that's something that they like really took into consideration, and it took it took, I think probably one of the reasons why it took like 6 months to get it started, trying to figure out how to do that on the business side. But just as like some concrete examples of small ways that this program has really helped boost us up and like just set us up for success. Like, and even if it, like I said, even if it's not with Niantic, which we like absolutely hope it is, but still, it's still setting us up for success.
And I want to say that that's a concern across the board. So for anybody who hasn't been in the game industry, like this is a resounding question that we got from a lot of people. So it's not something that we haven't heard, and so it's good to acknowledge it and be very clear that most studios want to take it on so that they can have full reins, right? And we wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, we're not setting someone back, but we're elevating them and we're empowering them. And I also wanted to put out there, I don't know how much more time we have, but if y'all in the audience want to ask a live question or put a question in the Q&A, I saw that there was 2 questions, upvote them. But I also like live questions because then we can see your face. But if y'all are interested, just click that little button in the corner, top corner, and say like, "Hey, I wanna ask a question," and you can sit at our table, our coffee table, and ask us a question for any of us. But there's Marissa. Marissa's helping us out. But Kelly, I definitely, and thank you, Jessica, because I truly believe that this has been a collaborative effort. Like we wouldn't have been able to get here if we didn't have a partner who was willing to give us that tough feedback. And I want to say to everybody who's listening, feedback is not a dirty word, period. There's a book about it, go read it. But I'll say, as a woman of color in this space, if you don't give me feedback, that means you don't care about my success and well-being. Yeah, I'm making a strong statement like that. If you don't care about me enough to give me feedback, then how am I going to be successful? I'm not perfect. I'll speak for myself. I'm not perfect. So how can you help me improve by giving me those questions? So I'm looking at the Q&As. Jason said, oh, wait, hold on. Let me make sure who's up leveling. So Rock Lee said, are you able to share what some of the gaps in the process that need to be addressed? Oh, here, Rock Lee's right here. So I'll let Rock Lee ask themselves. I think I pushed the button.
I saw it there for a second.
Rock Lee, did you? Oh, there you go. Okay.
Oh, okay, there you go.
There you go.
Oh, hey, it's good to see you. Well, I had another question, but I can ask that question too as well. So I was curious if you were able to share some examples of like the gaps in the process that needed to be addressed.
I think
you kind of did.
Yeah, I think Jessica. So that's what I was going to say. Jessica kind of answered that question, but if you have another one, we can.
So my other question was just on that last part. Was do you have any advice in accepting feedback, because it seems like the process, especially from from low power to high power, how to navigate that process so that people who are in the higher power position are able to listen to it.
Kelly, who wants to take that?
I mean, from my perspective, I think direct, respectful communications is the forum in which to have it. I think depending on the topic, right? Like there can be a lot of emotions and frustration around it, and it feels, so if I'm putting myself in that position, like it feels good to then go out and kind of blast on my community about it. But that doesn't actually get things to improve. And where's that balance in holding leaders and public figures responsible for their actions? But also, I mean, I like to think that the game industry is small enough that there's a lot of avenues for direct conversation. And certainly I also like to think those of us anyone who is taking on these kinds of initiatives in the industry are very receptive to that feedback and improving it. So that's my own perspective. I don't know, Trinidad, if you have other thoughts there.
I would agree with everything Kelly said. I also think that there's some passive ways to give feedback. Like if you're not comfortable necessarily having a direct conversation with someone, utilizing your advocates in this space. So one thing that I believe, and Jessica, tell me if I'm wrong, that I've tried to be in this program, and Kelly as well, and Stephanie, like we have a whole group of people who are working with Wicked Saints, is that Jessica has multiple avenues of people who she can sort of tap into and be like, hey, am I freaking out here? Or, what do you think? And then come together, and then we collectively can have these tough conversations and then bring them to leadership. Because at the end of the day, we're only as good as the feedback that we receive. And obviously, let's just keep it a buck. Like there's some feedback that we can solve on a one-on-one. Oh, you tripping, girl. That's not that they were having a bad day, or I'm like, that's a miscommunication. Let's go through it. But then there's others that are more systemically rooted, right? Like that are cracks within the system that are bigger than us. And so that's where we have to go up a level and go and see how we can break down those systemic cracks and rebuild them so that they can be a strong foundation. So I do think that there's levels to this. And in those levels, we're learning that some things can be solved amongst the crew and the team. And then there's other things that are a little bit more systemic that we need to build a village to attack it in a positive way.
Thank you very much. I'll let other people have a chance to ask their questions.
Thank you, Rock. I do see that it says here that there's another question by Jason Scott. 6 months to launch a new program doesn't seem like a very long time. What were the practices, culture, policy, structure, etc., already in place that enabled Niantic to respond so effectively? I think, Kelly, can you talk about Beyond Reality?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you, Jason, noticing that it feels like a long time and it isn't a long time at the same time. We did have an opportunity where I had just built this Beyond Reality initiative program. So that came out of the fact that my entire developer outreach strategy on 2020 was dependent on in-person events that obviously completely went sideways. And so it was, okay, how can we achieve the same goals that we had as far as reaching out to a broader developer network for Niantic and potential partners, and do that effectively online and with the resources we have available this year, since everyone's lives were going sideways. And so there was this call for developers and applications, a pitch process. We drove we sort of filtered applicants. We brought them to an online developer briefing session that talked about what it means to work with Niantic as a publisher, and then also a lot more information about the platform and technology that you'd be working on. So that way you could inform your pitch of a concept phase and what your team would be and how much would it cost. This is like a very long story short, which is to say, like, there were all of these pieces that we were like, oh, we can kind of leverage this work and this infrastructure that was just built and possibly just make some tweaks and tailor it to get to the infrastructure of what the Black Developers Initiative can look like. And again, that first step of the Black Developers Initiative being, what does it look like to simply refocus all of our energy that we did on like a broad, developers in XR call and target Black-led developers, and again, bring them through a modified version, but bring them through a similar process that we did and kind of see what happens. And we ended up having around 30 developers apply and submit pitches. that, you know, we're now in the final stages. Our expectation is to have around 2 to 4 that we're bringing through in these twice a year. So assuming that concept phases are happening around 6 months, we do twice a year this process. And so that did allow, and again, we also we had already cleared the basic partnership terms for those agreements. Like we had lots of templates. And so I think, Jason, you're hitting on kind of like why did we start with some of that same infrastructure is because it did allow us to kind of get going faster than building everything from scratch. And Niantic is also like a 700-person company, which is small in the tech space, right? And there are ways in which we're still pretty nimble.
Thank you, Kelly. I thought that was an amazing, like truly, because we had something in place and we were able to tweak it, but then also realize that we need to pivot in certain areas that helped us. I know that Megan Gardner has a question as well, and it was specifically for you, Jessica. So I'm going to ask it. When you were talking about transferring the skills from the game into real life, what specific techniques or tasks?
Oh no, you froze. Trudy.
But do you see the question?
I do see the question, so I'll go.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead and answer. Sorry, Trini, you froze for a second, but I see the question. So, Megan, oh my gosh, it's I'm like trying to figure out how I explain this to you without explaining like the entirety of the game. So the way that we structured this is that we have our interactive story game where you make choices throughout the game and progress through the game. And as you progress, so it has all the good stuff. It has betrayal, romance, all that kind of good stuff. As you progress through the story game, you are spending courage. And the only way to gain courage is to do stuff in the real world. And so you have to come out into the real world and you find these interdimensional rifts that hold these encrypted symbols. I'll get into it. That takes a whole much longer description. But as you unlock these symbols, there's all these different types that have to do with strength and understand and all these kind of things. You do the small, tiny little task we ask you to do. It might even be to reflect on something or to breathe a certain way or to think about something very, very small. And it gives you enough courage to continue with the story game. And so what we've done is that we have made super tiny incremental steps of small tasks that basically unlock larger tracks to bigger missions that you can do with friends and with others within this larger community. And so there's been a lot of beta testing and A/B testing on our side on like what actually gets people to move and do things. And so for us, it's very much kind of twofold of you're doing things within the story world and you're hopefully building your confidence the more that you do that. You're trying out different ways of dealing with adversaries and seeing what works and hopefully building your confidence in social interactions. And then we're giving you small tasks that are connected to those in the real world too that will help build your confidence, help get you out in the real world, help get you moving, thinking and engaging in your community, and then basically taking you along the way with rewards and leveling up in this bigger community and all this stuff to really kind of level up and be a major player in the world. So it's something that we learned from Battle for Humanity, trying to get people to just go out and do something without the guidance, without the confidence. It's hard to do that. And so we also have this awesome, cute little guide. His name's Dux that kind of like helps you within the Storyverse world and the real world. He helps guide you all the way around. So, so hopefully that was like probably a very vague and confusing description, but it's kind of how we're doing things.
Am I back or am I?
You are back.
Thank you for that answer, Jessica. We have one more question, and then I think we have time. And Sai, did you want to answer this question live? Oh, I don't see it. Kelly, I saw you answered it. Thank you. If anybody has
Sai had asked, just for anyone not looking at it, about opportunities at Niantic if you are not a game developer, and I mentioned that since we are both a gaming and a platform technology company, there's actually a lot of opportunities for people without game development backgrounds to come work at a game company, which is pretty unique. And we do, in fact, put absolutely everything on the website first. There's no hidden job roles or anything like that, which I'm very proud of, to be inclusive. So if you have any questions, hit me up. Happy to point you in a direction.
Awesome. I saw that Jihan said that this also helps with closing the gap in education too. So, oh, Rock Lee's back. Let's see what Rock wants to say.
So, and I guess a closing question for you. So, since Jessica was the first, when is the next one coming, and what will the next iteration of Black Developers Initiative look like?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So the next cohort will be starting soon. We're just finalizing the details around their various concepts. So hopefully you'll be hearing about them in a month or so. By the end of the month is what we're targeting. And we're certainly looking at, I mean, one of the challenges being that for Niantic specifically, right, we do geospatial games. So we're both, we're filtering on a lot of levels, is something Trinidad and I talk about, which is like, there's both the filter around game development and expertise, the needing to have a team in place, and then also specifically in the space of server authoritative games that require massive database calls and infrastructures is requires pretty sophisticated server engineering, which honestly, even Niantic has struggles in hiring for. So, and I mean, I think Jessica is like an amazing tech partner that she's found. So yeah, and that's like, we've noticed that is a very fortunate person to have on your team. So, you know, how can we adjust either the ways in which we're helping to supplement and complement the developers in creating their experiences, or simplify, you know, those aspects of the platform that they're interacting with? Is it more AR, less geospatial? Those are kind of the questions we're asking now as we get ready to kick off the next call for applicants.
So
anything else you wanted to add? Yeah.
No,
I was curious if you had any.
No, I was gonna say that was dope. I wanted to also give you, Kelly, you and Jessica, a chance to, like, is there any way that people can find out more about what y'all are doing, or Twitter, social, anything like that, like, just so that people can contact you if they want to?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. So it just type in Jessica Murray. It's with an E, and so it's nice because there's not too many of us with an E. Also go to wickedsaints.studio. So I will tell you that it hasn't been updated a lot, but still go and check it out because we have our text-based interactive story games. And so right now there's a scene from World Reborn that's all text-based, but it's really cool because it's about engaging in conversation with race. So see how you do, go in, see the choices you make, see how you score. And then there also are a game pitfall. So definitely go check it out.
Thank you, Jessica. Kelly.
I'm basically only on LinkedIn. I am a hermit, but you can totally feel free to connect with me there. And I also just wanted to, I sort of like pulled out some of the key questions or like gaps that I think for those of you who are looking at interested in joining us in the sort of the work in decreasing gaps in the game industry. I think there's a couple key points you can ask yourself, which is how can you help facilitate or ease the pains of risk taking that is necessary in games, taking off of what Jessica was saying earlier. How could you improve those qualifiers of minority developers? So are there opportunities you could create that give them that little stamp of approval on their resume that eases their future conversations? How could you make implied understandings more explicit? How could you make those expectations clear? I mean, one thing that happened, Humble Bundle, unrelated to their own BLM commitment, but they created a template for pitching projects that's amazing in doing this, like making those things that we all have in our head once you've done it a bunch of times really clear and easy to follow instructions on how to do it. And then what are the cheat codes that you have, and are you sharing those cheat codes with less privileged individuals? So I know we're over time now, but hopefully that empowers you to do some of this work as well.
That's awesome.
Thank you, everybody, so much.
I put those in the chat. So thank you, everybody. And please just copy paste those questions. And if you have any questions, hit us up. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter too. Holla back at your girl. Thank you all for being here today. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much, Kelly, for hosting, and Jessica for joining. And holla back, players. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.